This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we bring you information, insights, ideas, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. Head to mediasalesmastery.com to help pick the topic and guide the show.
This is Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. In each episode, we aim to bring you information, insights, and interviews from some of the industry's top thought leaders. I'm your host, Jamie Wood, and our guest today is Kelly Healy, General Manager of Agency Sales for News Corp Queensland. The topic we're going to be covering off today is one that I'm sure most of you have grappled with, which is expectation versus reality, the job ad versus the job description. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Welcome, Kelly. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to be here.
So it's really interesting, right? We caught up for coffee 2 weeks ago now, and we had this conversation around the media sales industry. And, you know, I'm lucky that I've got a peer group like yourself and other people where we can catch up and have a conversation around some of the challenges. And it was interesting to see just how many people in this industry in that sort of initial 18 to 36 month period are really grappling with what the industry actually is. I think working in media, working in, you know, what to the outside world can feel like showbiz and can feel like entertainment, coming in and being in a commercial position where you actually have to sell into an agency client base or into a direct client base, oftentimes I think people come in and they're a little bit shook by how different the position actually is. And so I thought let's kind of have that chat today, given your experience. But, you know, what's your sort of view on that? Do you think that in your team at the moment that there is a bit of a disconnect between what the role is and what they're expecting when they're coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, and to be honest, I probably had it when I came into the industry as well, because we've previously spoken about the fact that a lot of people who haven't worked in the industry don't really understand what we do. You know, my husband for many years never really knew what I did when people asked him. And so even though I came from studying at QUT, you know, 3-year degree in media and advertising, and truly didn't really know what, you know, working for a media organisation, you know, what was really involved. But I think a lot of the time, you know, you've got two sides when it comes to media. You've got the media agency side, you've got the media sales side, and they are two very different jobs. Majority of my career I've spent in the media sales side. I had a small stint at a full service agency, but that's where my experience lies. And when I came in, I started up on the mountain at Network 10, and you know, the understanding of what we actually did was not really clear. And I think one of the things that I say to a lot of people who come and have a crack at media is that you've got to be in it for the long haul. And when you actually come in, there is, you know, you're not on the TV, you're not in the pages of the magazine, you're not on air, you're not actually the glamour and the glitz of it. You get a lot of the benefits of the glamour and the glitz, but you need to understand that it's a high-paced, high expectation industry that we work in. And if you can learn to harness that and love that and have passion for that, you'll never look back and you'll love it.
And see, that's what I thought was interesting when you say you don't have a lot of an understanding of the difference between agency side or media side and media sales side. And they are fundamentally very different disciplines. Selling into an agency market or even into the direct market, they require a very specific approach, and it's a very unique skill set. You know, there's no tertiary qualification for it, really. There's not a lot of learning resources available either, and you know, I think of a lot of the content I look to, things like Mumbrella, Media Week, B&T, all of those trade publications, you know, that's very much geared towards people on the other side of the fence. That's geared towards the client base that we are selling into. What's always struck me is there's almost nothing available for the people who are there, you know, they're in the market selling into that space. And so that's what I wanted to create with this podcast. And I thought the best way to kick this off, first of all, is to talk about your first 5 years in the industry. And one of the main reasons for that is I think that we can both agree that that's the trial by fire, isn't it? That's really the making or breaking of you. And in an industry that has such a high attrition rate in those first 2 to 5 years, I wanted to kind of have a bit of a context as to what your experience was, those times where you maybe thought that it wasn't for you, and how you potentially tackled that. So let's kick into that now.
The first 5.
Okay, so the first 5 years, Kelly, talk to me about your first role in media sales.
Well, funnily enough, I'm back now where it all began. So at the tender age of 15, I headed in on my work experience to News Corp, Queensland newspapers. And I was lucky enough to actually land a week with someone who's been in the industry for many, many years, many decades, and I spent the week with her. I then went back when I studied at QUT and did an advertising degree and did work experience there. And that was a really important and critical part of my career because it showed, I guess, commitment that I wanted to learn, not just from the textbook, but to get some real life experience with that. And that absolutely helped me land my first job. My first job was up on the mountain, the infamous Mount Cootha, and, driving those winding roads every day at Network 10. So I started up there as a coordinator, and I spent a couple of years there before I headed off overseas, and I headed over to London. So both of those jobs were really critical in my career as well. And Network 10 taught me how our industry works, the good and the bad. TV, that was back in the heyday of, crazy times, and, it was a very socially different industry then. Very, very fun, and worked with some really great and crazy people. But I learned my business ethics there over those years. Late nights, Friday nights, working till 8, 9 o'clock on a Friday night doing material instructions while all of the, directors and account managers were out at a long lunch on a Friday afternoon. And, I was the one back, holding the fort and doing that. But it was, it was fun times, but I learned a lot. I learned a lot in those days, and it was a really important part of my career. I then picked that up and headed off over to London, where I worked for a couple of years at IPC Media, which is a magazine publishing house over there, and I did syndication. I walked in to take that job, actually, and I didn't even at the time know what syndication was, but I used my personality and my tenacity to be able to secure that job over there, and it paid huge dividends. And I know we've spoken about this before, but for some reason there's a perception, and I think it still exists, that in Australia your time in London is really beneficial. And I think that was a critical part to really put me on that trajectory at a really young age into a very senior role. Those back in those days, it took at least 10, 15 years before you'd be able to get director in your name. I know those times have changed. People move a lot quicker into those roles now, but, that was really important. So it was great. Network 10 was a fantastic place to start as a coordinator, a lot of high pressure, expectations and huge responsibility on someone very young. But across the last 18, 20 years I've been doing this, I've moved around a lot, and the purpose, that was very purposeful. The reason for it is I wanted to get an understanding of every media channel. Yeah. So across the years I've worked in pretty much for every media organisation across different channels, and with that has come the ability to be able to truly understand how different channels can I guess help piece together a great campaign. That's why wherever I work, whatever media company, I try and partner with other media organisations if and where I think an idea has legs to sit across, and I think that's really beneficial, especially today working with our media agencies.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you touched on a really interesting point there around, the senior directors out to the long lunch and you were there doing material instructions and working those big hours. And I do think that's a critical thing that people do need to remember. I mean, from my personal experience in media sales, I started at 23 selling direct on a classic hits AM music radio station. And, that was really grinding it out for a good year and a half. Not necessarily the kind of high volume that you were talking about, but certainly that kind of pressure cooker environment where there were a lot of demands on your personal time, a lot of, I suppose, just stress related to the position, and plenty of opportunities where I really did have to ask, I'm not seeing the return here, I'm not earning the money, I can't see the career path. So I suppose the question is, where throughout that career, being fairly career-oriented by the sounds, were there intervals there or times where you did want to step away, or were you very serious about leaving the industry?
That's such an interesting question. And I think I was challenged definitely at different stages, but I've never wanted to leave the industry. And I think I find it interesting because I know there's a lot of people that have this question. And it's not that I probably didn't ask that question, but I just fell in love with this industry. I think it's something that it's an industry, and if you're generally surrounded by clients who become your friends. I moved to Sydney a few years ago, back again, funnily enough, with Network 10. And in that year, I really missed the Brisbane media market because a lot of the dealings that we have on a daily basis are your clients, but these people also become some of your longest friends in that you have in your life. So I haven't ever said, I definitely don't want to do this anymore. I have questioned how much commitment I personally give to my jobs, and I think that's a personality thing.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing when you're coming through the ranks and you're getting into this industry is that you learn to manage your time and not let the industry manage your time.
Yeah.
And I guess what I mean by that is you need to be really conscious of how you work, because it's very easy to sit at your desk until 8, 9 o'clock at night. And there's plenty of people that will do that. But you have to learn to be really strict on yourself and, make sure you get a really good, I call it an operating rhythm. And it's definitely, it's a News Corp ethos. It's something that we work into how we work on a daily basis. And what that means is, how do you work personally, but how does that impact your team around you? And, when are your meetings and how are you doing this? And you need your own personal operating rhythm. What's important to you? And I'm big on health. Health is so important in my life. And I think anyone who's ever talked to me knows, how much I'm passionate about that topic. But without it, you've got nothing. And this industry can damage your health because it's very stressful and it does take long hours. And there are a lot of lunches and entertaining. So, all the things that are the perfect mix for not a healthy lifestyle.
And I'm going to get you to hold that thought, because I think that's a big part of what we want to get into today, is to talk around work-life balance and probably the context of work-life balance in an industry that does have big demands on your time and also your mental state. So we might jump into that. But the last question I've got in the first 5 for you, Kel, what do you think what are the skills that somebody needs in order to master the art of media sales?
You can teach product, but you can't teach personality and you can't teach passion. And that's what you need. You need to make sure that your personality is the right fit for this industry. And what I mean by that is you don't have to come with it, but you just need to be aware of who you are. You might not naturally be someone who's an extroverted, which is the natural personality trait. My God, any kind of media sales conference, you're just surrounded by people like yourself and you're so over them over a couple of days, because we're all big personalities. If you're not a big personality, don't let that stop you. Just be aware of that and work on that and work on how you can get through it. And passion. And anyone who's ever worked with me knows that that's really, really important in my team. And I think you can do anything, and as long as you do whatever it is that you're doing with passion, you'll do exceptionally well.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Great answer.
Media sales mastery.
Okay, so, we were obviously talking about expectation versus reality, and I suppose the question I'd have is, when people are coming into your team, what's their expectation of what the role's going to be day to day?
I think with my team, I try to live the ethos of radical candor in my team. It's something I learned probably about 15 years ago by someone that I look up to. I've never formally mentored with anyone, but I have definitely had my people across the years that I've looked at and really appreciated their style of leadership. And I think what's really important is that the expectations are set right from the beginning, so they understand what's required of them. And that's not necessarily a time thing, because it's really important. I try to make sure I leave the office no later than 6 every night, because I know that if I stay later, my team will stay later.
Yeah.
And I may take it home and work probably for 3 hours at home, but my team don't need to know that. And so the big thing is, I think that it's really important that they understand that what they're walking into is a challenging environment. The pressure's high, the stress is high. There's you as a young person in your very first job could be sitting there keying material, and you could be one wrong key could result in hundreds of thousands of
massive
dollars
flow-on effect
impact
from that. Yeah.
And I've seen it happen, and and it's not a great outcome for the client or for that poor person. But there's huge responsibility. So setting those expectations right from the very beginning is really critical, and helping them understand that what their role entails and the impact that their role has on the broader business is something I do. I also try to spend time with anyone who's new into our industry, because I think as leaders, you often forget the impact that you have on people coming in just by giving someone 15 minutes a week of a quick coffee one morning a week when they're first starting out. That impact can be absolutely huge on those individuals, and it can just give them that opportunity to be able to ask or not ask and just listen. So I think that's the most important thing.
That's a really good point, because, somebody told me this a long time ago when I stepped into a sales leadership role, and I was quite young at the time. So it was all quite new to me. And I remember having this view of, I need to be seen to be the hardest worker in the team, and I don't want to ask the team to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, and had that viewpoint of really trying to lead by example. But I got pulled aside a few times, and they said, you've got to remember that your team, these young people coming into the industry, a lot of them have ambition to move into your role. And what they actually want to see is you treat yourself well. They want to see that you come in composed. They want to see that you have a good work-life balance. They want to feel like what they're doing now, which is obviously quite stressful and quite high pressure, is all towards a bit of an end game where they can actually step into a role. Now, you and I both know the reality that it never gets any easier.
Yeah.
You just get more competent at what you're actually tackling. But I think that raises a really good point, Kel, around, putting some of those hard stops on your day, but also setting expectations with the guys of, you are going to walk into a bit of a pressure cooker, and that's actually what it is. And it is for a bit, a fair while as well. So I guess when we sort of talk about that, in your view, is there sort of a standard period where it takes people coming newly into the industry? Is there a standard period of time that you think it takes before people start to feel comfortable and competent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, if you're coming in cold to the industry, 18 months is really what it takes to fully get your head around what we do and how it works. And, you can be running pretty blind, because if you're working at a media organisation that just looks after one media channel, you've got a very, linear view on exactly what happens in our industry. And just getting your head around how that particular media channel works and the internal workings of that organisation.
Yeah, and that's a major one, isn't
Massive.
it? Yeah.
Look, I've been doing this for a long time, and I walked into radio, 4 years ago now. And when I walked in there, I'd worked, at other media organisations, but I didn't understand the daily operations. There are a lot of synergies across different media channels, but they all, and even media organisations within themselves, operate very differently. So for me, it took me at least 6 to 8 months to truly understand how radio stations worked, who were the key stakeholders, how can we actually make things happen, and how can we get those things working. So it's really important to give yourself that time. But I think the biggest thing is to find yourself someone that you can learn off really quickly.
That's a really good, that sort of flows onto my question around, people wanting to fast track their competence.
Yes.
Because you made a good point, like so much of what we do in media sales is actually internal stakeholder management, almost as an advocate for our clients externally. And so you do have to be very good at playing that middle ground and meandering through different politics and balancing priorities. So would your view be that anyone who is currently listening right now that might be at that kind of critical point where they just don't feel like they're making progress, to really go and seek out a mentor or to seek out a wing person as such?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the first thing I'd recommend, whatever stage in your career. I'm doing it right now. I've stepped into News Corp. Yes, I am a returned veteran, but, I'm in a very different role now, and the business has changed. Our industry, it's the only thing that we are all certain of in media is that change is going to happen every week. So for me, I've always aligned myself to someone that I know has been in that organisation for a long time, understands the workings, knows the people, and who to contact. At News, we call them news navigators. Okay. Obviously, News Corp is a huge organisation, and you need navigators within our business to be able to help find the answers to the questions you're seeking. So for me, I've always done that. I talked about radio when I got in there. I definitely had a wingman. I annoyed the hell out of her for a good 6 to 8 months.
You want to give her a shout out? Or?
She knows who she is. She knows who she is.
I think I know who she is too.
And she was absolutely instrumental in that play for me, because I brought a lot to the table in other areas, but understanding that organisation, it was critical for me to have someone there and just ask questions. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I've got to anyone out there. Don't sit there and wonder, ask, and ask the person that you know is going to give you the right answer.
Yeah.
Don't ask the person that's your mate. Find the person that you know has the most to learn off and who's running at full straps, because they're the ones who are going to, want to give you a handout. And don't forget the power of asking someone for help. People love to help people.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think if you're new into an organization or a role within an organization, seeking out that person is really critical.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think fundamentally there are never really any new problems.
Absolutely.
We always have kind of an iteration of the same problem. It's just a case of kind of going, how would you recommend I play this one? So my advice to anyone out there is very much like you, Kelly, to go, it's better to be that squeaky wheel and it's better to seek people out. And it's a great networking tool internally in an organization as well. People will be massive advocates for you if they see you being somebody who seeks them out, acknowledges they've got expertise and maybe a bit of political capital.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend it.
I think a lot of people sometimes too don't want to ask questions because they don't want to be seen as not knowing something. And I think that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
I'd call that out to anyone, if you're not sure about something, or, you can be in a presentation and the speaker will ask, does everyone know what that means? And people are too scared to put up their hand and say, I don't know. Be that person, be brave and be brave and ask that question, because you'll get the answer and you'll be wiser for it and you'll be better at what you do. The people who sit there and don't ask the question and think, I'll go and Google that or see, just ask the person, because probably the person that you're asking the question to has got years of experience and will be able to give you more than just what you're going to find on Google.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about how long it can actually take, if you're talking about 18 months just to get to a place where you feel like you've got the day-to-day rhythm of your role down, it can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years to really feel in an organization or even just in the industry to really feel like you've got a good grounding of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Beneath you.
And every media channel is so different.
Yeah.
You can walk in, every media organization and media channel has a different set of acronyms. Our industry, and I'm sure there's other industries, are famous for it. So when you walk in and they start saying things or asking, making comment, ask that question, because you know what? That funny little acronym is probably just isolated to that particular media organisation. So ask lots of questions.
And so I want to jump back to your time at Channel 10 in television, because when we did the Survey Monkey ahead of this podcast, we really wanted to get a good understanding of, I suppose, the expectation versus reality. And for some people, I think in TV in particular, to your point, you're coming in a role that is very much data entry based. It's about material, it's about accuracy, it's about numbers. And I dare say a lot of the people that are coming into that medium have a real passion for TV and for the product and for programming. So when you've got people that are taking that first critical step in their career in, let's say, television, just as for the sake of using that as a real world example, what would you say is the secret to them making sure that they don't feel like their role is too monotonous and they're still getting some level of exposure or some ability to be a bit creative in their role?
Yeah, absolutely. Creativity is an interesting one. And I think in the media sales or media agency side of things, there is a perception around, and perception is a lot of reality in this case, of media schedules. We're all very good at Excel. We are probably, it's our thing. But the thing is that especially with media salespeople, they are usually the extroverts that we were talking about before, but also with that comes a huge amount of creativity. And creativity is critical. And I've had people over the years say to me, I'm not a creative. And I call bullshit on that. Yeah. I also, and the reason for that is that everyone's creative. All you need to do to be creative is have a conversation. And that's how, I've just come from running the studio at Southern Cross Stereo. And in there, our creativity is led by conversations. Yeah. And that's how you land on a good idea, because it usually stems back to a human behavior. which, as we all know, is what we use an insight to be able to develop and substantiate what our creative idea is. And that's what makes it strong. But for us, the monotony of those early years of sitting there and, my God, my first 3 years, I literally spent sitting at a desk, putting schedules and bookings in, doing material instructions. And it's important. You need to do that stuff and you need to spend those years doing it because it helps you understand the importance of those schedules and how they work and how you put them together.
Yeah.
The creative side of it comes in many different ways and forms so that you don't get bored. And the one recommendation I would have is step up and ask to do more. A lot of people don't. They will sit there and think, oh, there's an account manager leaving. Oh, surely my sales director will offer me the position. They won't. They won't unless you step forward and put your hand up and show that you're keen. I would never employ a coordinator and put them in an account manager role if they hadn't come to me and asked that they want that job.
And taken some ownership. I completely agree.
Absolutely.
We have this debate a lot in our organisation around creativity, and one of the best definitions of creativity, and I encourage anyone who's listening to apply this to whatever role you're in now, is creativity is the solution to a problem that is functional and novel. Right? And when we talk about the context of being creative in your role, if you're sitting there doing material all day, every day, or if you're interacting with other coordinators day in, day out, think about how you can have creative solutions to some of the issues you're finding in your role. Think about how every touch point you have is a touch point on behalf of your organization. So you've got more influence than you think to be creative in the role.
Yes.
But I completely agree with your point. I think one of the big traps that people can fall into is to go into a brainstorming environment or go into a media organization and think that creativity and idea generation is the job of the integration team or the job of the content team.
Absolutely.
Everybody is responsible for it. And I can guarantee some of the best ideas that I've ever heard in my 10 years in media have come from the 23-year-old coordinator who has made the time to come into the brainstorm.
Absolutely, because they're in touch with the audience. They are the audience in a lot of our situations. And I think they come from a position where they haven't had the years of experience that we've had that have black-hatted ideas. So they come in with fresh thinking and new ideas. And, they're really important people to have in those sessions. I encourage all of you to ask to see briefs, to be able to then see the responses that came through on those briefs as well, because that will really help you understand very quickly exactly the process and what you can put together and project your career.
Yeah, and that's such a good point is don't be afraid to just dive a little bit deeper. I'm building a schedule, but let's actually look at the solution behind this.
Yeah.
When we're bringing a campaign to life, are we inputting a booking in a system or are we actually activating an idea? And how do we make sure that we can be the custodians of that? So I think that's a really, really great insight. Let's talk about work-life balance because this to me is one, I think, let's say you're somebody who's working big hours early on, to your point earlier, like you're there till 7, 8 o'clock at night, you're really doing that. So I think we've covered off that and we've managed those expectations. But let's talk about when you're like 3 years into media sales and let's talk about compartmentalizing work stress from your home life. How do you find that? Has it been difficult for you to get harmony in terms of your work life? Do you find that your day bleeds into your personal life and vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is a natural piece of what our industry is. And for many of us who've been around for many years, what's actually ended up happening is that we've all become friends so that we spend a lot of time together. So your work life and your personal life definitely blend in that area. The most important thing and the piece of advice that I've got is you need to be strict on your routine. When you log off. It's really important because if you don't log off when you leave the office, you actually don't have that time to refresh and reset, and you then become not as productive as you could be. The best people, and I encourage people in my team to do this. We're really lucky at News Corp. We have a gym in our facilities, and I encourage people in my team, bring your runners, go get changed, head downstairs for 20 minutes, at any time of the day. Our industry now is not set on 9 to 5. You need to do these things when work best for you. So if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, go and smash out 20 minutes on the treadmill if that's going to help you feel better. If it's going for a brief walk by yourself when a brief comes in, that's something I've always recommended to my account managers. But the most important thing is when you log off and turn off. The weekend is sacred time.
Yeah.
I'm very protective, I think, of that time for me, because my thing is Monday to Friday, I give everything to my job, and I always have. Everyone's different, and people have got different commitments in their life and different, situations at home. But my biggest thing is you need to log off on the weekends, and you need to take that downtime, one, to replenish yourself, and make sure that you're looking after yourself personally and health-wise, but it also makes you better at your job.
Such a good point. And that point around exercise, and not to get put too fine a point, because exercise is one thing that for me personally I like to do in the morning, and it really energizes me for the day. It's great for mental clarity. It's part of that morning ritual that really sets me up. But what I'd say to people listening is find that thing that makes you feel like $1 million.
Absolutely.
Find that thing that gives you energy. Find that thing that gets you in a good headspace, so that when you do hit your day, you're hitting it in your fifth gear, and you're hitting it in a way where you're mentally resilient, you're stress resistant, and you've got the ability to go in and feel that at the end of the day, whatever time you choose to finish, you've left it all there, and you're comfortable that you can put that hard stop on your day and move into, your home life.
Yeah, absolutely. For many years, I worked in publishing and magazines, and I used to read the back page of Vanity Fair was always a 48 hours with a well-known, globally and renowned fashion designer. And I always found it really interesting reading how they spend their days. I always talk about the look in your handbag. And the biggest thing that a lot of those guys do, they simplify a lot of things in their life, as in that they shouldn't put energy into, so that they can put energy into the things that count.
So true, yeah.
They start their day usually with half an hour in a peaceful environment. A lot of them didn't do. I'm exactly the same as you, Jamie. Exercise in the morning is critical for me. It helps give me that clarity and that time to myself. But they would wake up, and a lot of them, it would be they would sit and have their cup of tea in half an hour in silence by themselves, and they'd read the paper or read something that's actually of interest to them, and it was their time. And then in the mornings they would always have a certain a work uniform that they wore. And if you look at anyone who's hugely successful, the famous one of Steve Jobs, but he's not the first one to do that. Fashion
where
designers,
they all dress the same.
They wear a very similar thing. And if you look at fashion designers, they all do the same thing. They all have very much their work uniform. It's really interesting, right? For someone who's a famous fashion designer, you would think that would be their key thing of the day. Because they have to spend their day making decisions, they alleviate any other decisions that they don't need to make in their life. And it's very clever. So it's a very good tip that I've stolen from them over the years.
So that's a good point, because to me it's willpower management. You have a finite resource on any given day of willpower. Let's be real, you do. Some people have more than others, and I think you're absolutely right. Channel your willpower and your decision making into the areas where it's going to have a high return, and try to really kind of simplify your life, because the worst thing you can do, and I know I was guilty of this, because look, let's be real, as a salesperson, success is so tangible for you. It's, are you hitting your number or are you not hitting your number? And when you're not hitting your number, it can be very, very easy to live in a world where you're just constantly consumed by this. If you're getting work-related pressure to hit your number. And so what I'd say to everybody at the moment who's really kind of, I suppose, grappling with that is going, when you think about attaining budgets and when you think about going into a work environment day to day, and you might be on paper underperforming by the conventional sort of, are you hitting target or not? You've really got to make sure that the stress and pressure of that doesn't bleed into your personal life. You do not want to bring that home to your family. You do not want to bring that home to your partners. You certainly don't want to be living with it 16, 17 hours a day. So I think you've got a great point there, Kel, of you've really got to make sure that once you are switching off, you are switching off. And I think that's a really, really nice transition into the last thing here before we get into our segment for the week around I can't ask my sales manager that. What's the big picture, right? So let's say we've got somebody that's sought out this podcast and they're maybe struggling at the moment with a bit of work pressure. Maybe they can't see a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. What's the big picture? Why should somebody invest the next 3 to 5 years of their career mastering media sales? What lies beyond that?
I think the first few years are the toughest. You're trying to get your head around what it's all about and where do you fit into this. My advice to you is seek out someone who's actually done it before and someone you can relate to, because it is definitely worth it. This is an industry that completely wraps its arms around you. And what I mean by that is that it's very supportive, not only the people, but the industry itself. I love the Brisbane media industry because it definitely supports each other. Over the years, you've come through the ranks together. So we were saying earlier that, years ago I started as a coordinator. All of the MDs and directors that sit in agencies and sit in media side now are actually my peers at a senior level.
You started, yeah.
Exactly. And the really amazing thing about that is that when any of you fall on hard times, whether it be work or personal, you've got an industry that supports you, and it's really powerful, and it's definitely in full swing in the Brisbane market. Sydney and Melbourne are amazing as well, but locally here in Brisbane specifically, I know that our industry here, and I've been on the end of that where the phone's been ringing, and on the end of it is someone just saying, hey, how are you going over there? I know you guys are doing it tough. I know there's something going on, what's happening. And it's just a really powerful thing from a lifestyle perspective. When you are in your 40s and you've got a family, and work now is about, supporting your family, putting your kids through school, paying mortgages, the very serious adulting stuff that we all put in our briefs. It's really awesome to know that you've got an entire industry that really just wants to see each other do well.
Yeah, the life of a 25 to 54 demographic, hey? It's just filled with all that kind of stuff.
That's it.
I think that's a great summation of this week around expectation versus reality.
I can't ask my sales manager that.
Okay, this is an interesting segment that we've come up with, and it's really based on what you guys told us you wanted to see. It's called I Can't Ask My Sales Manager That. So, Kel, don't take anything personally as a general manager of sales. If there are certain things that I think it's very difficult to probably ask your boss. And Absolutely. So what we want to do is have a forum where people can give us a question every week around something. Maybe it's a little bit politically sensitive. Maybe it's a bit of an interpersonal thing. Maybe it's something where somebody just doesn't want to ask the question, of anyone in their immediate kind of workplace or peer group. So I'm hoping I'm getting this name right, because I believe the pronunciation is Tyler, but it's spelled Tiyler. So it's either Tyler or Taylor. But the question comes from Tyler. I started a new job as an account manager for a trade publication about 4 months ago. The company and products seem good, but I'm struggling with mixed messages from my manager. They told me in the interview that they had a thorough induction program to help me fast track my knowledge of the product and the sales processes. The problem is that from my second day in the job, my manager got me to immediately start contacting clients and told me to focus on booking appointments in, the pursuit of generating revenue as soon as possible. Now, I feel like I'm being pushed to generate revenue, but I'm really not confident enough in our product or in our internal sales processes to sell it confidently. It's been 4 months. I'm really embarrassed to tell my manager about how much around the business I still don't actually know, and I feel like I'm really just chasing my tail. What should I do?
Great question.
It is a great question. Phrased really well too.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one because, look, you're not alone. This happens, and it has happened to me many times. I had a very similar experience, many years ago that impacted me, where I walked into a meeting. I was 2 weeks into the job, had no product knowledge of what I was there talking about, and walked into a meeting of about 8 people, executives, the CMO of the business, the actual client itself, and asked to actually present our brands. And I danced. I danced on the spot, and we got through it. What I would suggest is publishing in itself, and it's a great question for me because that's where I've spent a large part of my career. Publishing is an awesome industry to work in, and the reason for it is that you are surrounded by editors, and editors are the people that know their brands and their product better than anybody. And my recommendation to you would be to call out on your editor and see if they will actually come to a couple of meetings with you. And even prior to that, if they can't come out to a meeting with you, ask to have a meeting with them and get them to tell you about their product. Who's their reader? Who's their audience? How do they engage? Why do they choose the content they do? How do they select the topics that they put in? And understand who are their key stakeholders in that particular magazine it is that you're working on. Talk to those sub-editors that are in there as well. So it might be your beauty, it might be your fashion editors, and get an understanding of what they write and why they write it. And when you do that, you'll start to really understand what the product is. The rates are the rates, right?
Yeah.
No matter what channel you work in, you can get a rate card. I know there's casual rates there. No one uses them anymore. They should. If you're listening, you should. But the thing is that you can learn so much more on the run and in a meeting and in front of a client with someone that you respect and actually knows that brand than you can sitting down and reading a textbook about it. Sales is definitely one of those industries that if you learn and you have the passion behind what you do, you'll fumble your way through it and you'll learn on the fly. Unfortunately, a lot of media organisations don't have the training budgets that they used to, and that has made it very difficult for new people coming through. So I was really lucky in my early days. I did 1,000 sales negotiation skills courses.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you did too, Jamie. And the thing is that teaches you the fundamentals of how to sell and close deals. And that would be the biggest call out on learning how to close a deal. It is a skill set and you need to train and learn how to do that properly. But learning product, search it out, seek it out yourself. If you're working for an organisation that hasn't given you everything that what you need, go and find it.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you'll probably never have enough, but don't sit and wait internally 3 to 4 weeks if you're a salesperson to learn about the product, because you're going to put yourself 3 to 4 weeks or 3 to 4 months behind getting started in the job.
And that's it. I think what you've said there is sort of a summary of my thoughts too, because I think when we're talking about learning the product, learning the skill set, getting the training, and even just the internals, where do I put expense claims? How do I potentially book my annual leave? All that hygiene. I suppose my recommendation would be to go, first and foremost, your priority always has to be revenue generation, whether it's day 1 or it's day 120. That's what you're employed to do. And for anyone who's really struggling at the moment going, yeah, but I want to actually devote time to upskilling myself or to getting this knowledge, I would really look at your day as core hours and non-core hours. So there's a resource that I'm going to point you to. So head to mediasalesmastery.com and send us an email. We've got a thing called a 90-day planner. And what that actually does is for anyone going into a new role or wanting to get reinducted, it gives you a good way of structuring your day and prioritizing those high return tasks. And I would say early morning / late afternoon are good times to focus on booking those internal meetings, Kel, and having those chats with editors, being able to go down to payroll and get a query, but making sure that you protect that time in the middle of the day to do what your manager is asking you to do, which is to book the appointments and to engage and interact with clients. Now, it's not perfect, but the world's not perfect. And I think being, people that are expected to be quite autonomous and self-starters, I think naturally when you employ a salesperson, your expectation is they get in, roll up the sleeves and take a bit of ownership of that stuff too. So great answer. Thank you.
Not a
Glad
problem.
you had here. Great question too. Keep them coming, guys. That one came through SurveyMonkey, but feel free to head onto the website and email them directly as well. Full anonymity assured. And sorry if I got your name wrong there too. Well, Kel, that kind of wraps it up. I got to do the hygiene of don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes, leave a review because it helps us get found by people. And I really hope that people do find this podcast and that it does resonate, because the whole point of this, from our conversation, we really want to make sure this has value to people in the industry. We really want to make sure that the content is guided by you. So let us know topics you want us to cover. Hit us with questions. You pick the topic, you guide the show. But please tune in, tell people about this as well. Kel, it's been great having you on the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamie.
Is there anything you want to leave? Is there any parting thought you want to leave people with as they go out there and venture out to their next deal or to their next exciting step in the media sales industry?
Just enjoy every second of it. There's a lot of really awesome stuff that comes your way when you work in media, and really enjoy those moments and celebrate your wins. It's the biggest thing. You need to stop and take check. When you get that booking or you land that deal, go and celebrate it and give yourself a pat on the back. Take your commission, slice off a piece and do something special with it. Something that you wouldn't normally treat yourself with, because you need to celebrate yourself and your own success.
Fantastic. It's been an absolute pleasure having you. All the best. I'm sure you're going to smash it in your new role.
Thanks,
and
Jamie.
I think we've got to get you back very soon.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Media Sales Mastery, the podcast for media sales professionals. Head to MediaSalesMastery.com to help pick the topic, guide the show, and don't forget to subscribe to receive new episodes each week.